Hi, folks. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to give people a couple more minutes to join, and we will be getting started shortly. Starting to see people trickle in, so we're just going to give folks a couple more minutes, and we will get started in just a minute.
Sounds good, Kim. Hello, everybody. If you want to say hello and say where you're from in the chat. Always fun to see where people are in the world.
Okay, looks like we've got a good quorum here, so we can go ahead and get started. Thank you all again for joining us today. I'm Kim King. I'm the Senior Director of Product Marketing at HYCU, and I'm joined by Mark Niemeyer, who's the Senior Director of Product Management at HYCU. And today, Mark will be talking you all through some of the challenges with legacy data protection, some of the unseen costs, and talk to you about a better solution. During the broadcast, there's a Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to add any questions you have directly into that Q&A box. We will do our best to answer them as we go or after the webinar during the live Q&A. Any questions that we're not able to get to during the broadcast, we will follow up individually and make sure to get those answered for you all. So with that, I will hand it over to Mark.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kim. Good morning, everybody. From a pretty frosty California, actually. But yeah, hope everybody's having a good day. So yeah, by means of introduction, Kim already said, my name is Mark Niemeyer, part of the product management team here at HYCU. Joined about 6 months ago, actually was at Nutanix for a long time, about 7 years, where I headed up the product team for anything around business continuity. So both the Nutanix native capabilities around snapshotting, replication, DR, the as a service offering at Nutanix as well, right? So currently known as Xyleap, and also the ecosystem of data protection vendors around the Nutanix platform. Worked with HYCU quite extensively ever since they basically started building data protection for Nutanix. Always had a great relationship working with them, so decided why not join them and see if it's fun working for them as well. So here I am in my day-to-day job, really focusing on data protection of like the next generation applications, right? So primarily like as a service applications. There's a lot of mission critical data in there, but of course still very involved with our Nutanix relationship and building that out even more. So very excited to be here today. Like Kim said, talking about legacy data protection. Just like Nutanix's goal in life really is to provide simplicity and modernization in your data center to run any workload, right? To run your primary workloads, mission critical workloads, and so on. On the basically removing a lot of the complexity that is there, right? Around storage and compute and storage networking and security and virtualization and so on. Nutanix does a fantastic job, and I think I'm preaching to the choir over here, building out Prism, making it very easy to deploy new workloads, doing the day-to-day management and so on. The fact is that on the data security side, on the backup and recovery side, we typically see a lot of that complexity pop up as well. And HYCU's goal in life is to provide simplicity for data protection, for secondary workloads, et cetera, et cetera. So let's dive in a little bit into it. Right, there's really two aspects to legacy data protection that provides, I would say, really big pain points for you, right? Number one is, of course, increased cost. We're all experiencing rising prices all over the place, whether that is from a hardware perspective, from a software perspective, from an availability perspective as well. We're all looking at like months and months of lead time sometimes. While on the other side, our CFO is always telling us we need to cut down costs, we need to cut down budget and so on. So there's this friction that is going on over there. But of course, we all have to scale as well, right? So we are all still growing. We're all doing mergers and acquisitions, right? So keeping your IT environment and your IT domain ready to basically grow with the organization is very, very important. But on the other side, right, there is a lot of complexity. I touched on that on the previous slide already. There's a lot of complexity that you're dealing with from a day-to-day perspective. Nutanix, like I said, does a fantastic job reducing that complexity with basically bringing in their NCI platform with Prism to make everything super easy to manage, right? From a deployment perspective, day-to-day management perspective, from a troubleshooting perspective. We see the same, like I said, we see the same on the data protection side. There is a lot of hardware involved, right, to run your backup applications, to do the storage management and so on. And if something goes wrong, you're probably spending all day troubleshooting, looking at log files in 17 different places, looking at different troubleshooting stacks, potentially dealing with multiple support organizations as well. So very labor intense, just to keep the lights on, just to keep your backups running, just to make sure that you fit within your backup windows and so on. And there is still a lot of complexity in legacy data protection solutions as well, right? If you think about it, some of those major vendors, they started doing backup and recovery back in the mainframe days, and now we're talking probably about 30 years ago, right? And they have had to evolve their architecture and building bolt-ons for like PCs. Then virtualization came in like probably about 15 years ago. Then people started building private clouds, rolling out Kubernetes. And now, like I said in the beginning, we're more and more moving into a public cloud world where mission critical data is sitting in things like SaaS applications or database as a service or platform as a service applications. So those legacy solutions, they have been forced to go with that, but they've never really taken the time to simplify their architecture, start from the beginning really, and build the right solution for this very agile environment, if you may. HYCU has had the opportunity to do that, and I'll show you in a little bit how we have done that. Look at the current market. There are quite a few, what I call in Nutanix talk, right? It's the legacy three-tier architecture solutions. We see that for your primary infrastructure with storage, networking, compute, virtualization, and so on. But we also see that with backup, right? Where you are dealing with storage, right? Storage is probably one of the most important components. The backup software needs to run somewhere, right? You're dealing with security, you're dealing with virtualization, because you probably don't want to run those as physical workloads as well. And then from a software perspective, there are so many different components, from a data mover perspective, from a storage management perspective, from a clouds interfacing perspective, from a reporting perspective, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a whole bunch of complexity within that software stack as well. Another thing that we saw coming up over the last probably like 15 years ago is people started building backup appliances, and there's really two flavors of those. One is where the backup appliance provides very optimized storage to the backup stack, right? Just providing storage that is fantastic at doing deduplication, doing compression, doing erasure coding, and so on, really reducing the cost of storage, especially when you drop multiple copies of your data on there. Complex because you really have to rip and replace maybe your NetApp array, your EMC array, but there's a lot of goodness there as well, right? So from a storage optimization perspective, it's great, fantastic dedupe rates, fantastic compression rates. It is operationally hard when you start doing restores, because now basically the storage needs to rebuild all of those deduped images and so on, and provide you one single image. So there's a lot of complexity going on there that they have hidden away from you. The second flavor of backup appliances is really those all-in-one appliances, right? Where storage, compute, virtualization, all is bundled within the same appliance. Once again, it forces you to rip and replace something that you already have in place, and replace it with this new stack. That's honestly, they're doing a good job, right? But it is rip and replace. It is yet another management stack that you have to manage in your data center. And then most recently, what we see is people started taking their legacy architecture stack and building a as a service around that, right? So they're moving all of that complexity, they're running that somewhere in their cloud on one of the public clouds, and then build a shim layer around that to make it look like and behave as a service, right? Backup as a service, data protection as a service, disaster recovery as a service. But really, it is a shim layer around all of that complexity. And once you start using that, you sometimes can feel that, right? Yes, most of the operations are nice and simple, and there's something somewhere in a web page. But if something goes wrong, or if you have to make some advanced configuration changes, you have to drop into like their legacy UI, et cetera, et cetera. If we look at that from an architecture perspective, let's have a look at how that looks like, right? So very simple on-prem data center, right? You're either running Nutanix with AHV or ESX. You might be running some legacy VMware ESX deployments out there. You might have some physical hosts that are running databases, et cetera, right? Typically, to deploy a standard legacy data protection stack, there's many components that you have to deploy, that you have to size correctly, that have to be configured correctly. This alone can take days or weeks to basically do that right sizing of your initial deployment, right? So you need to have backup servers that do all of the scheduling and all of the indexing, et cetera, et cetera. You need to deploy proxies close to the workload so they can actually take the data out, right? Making the data movers move storage into storage. And of course, there you need to have storage connectors that integrate at a lower level with storage, maybe do some snapshots over there. If you want to go to the cloud, you might have to deploy cloud proxies and cloud storage connections, and et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, at the moment you want to do like centralized management, get another component, get another virtual machine that needs to run somewhere. If you want to create reports that span across your data centers, you might have to deploy yet another server that does the reporting for you. And so from a deployment perspective, I said, this can take days, weeks, sometimes even months. But I've also talked to a lot of customers, and their upgrade process is very lengthy. They have to do a lot of planning, make sure that their upgrade sequence is correct, right? That they upgrade the right components at the right point in time, because otherwise things might break, and things do break, right? And then you have to look at lots of different stacks, making sure that from a troubleshooting perspective, you're looking at the right places, making everything work, et cetera, interaction with support, things like that. A lot of pain points. Some of the legacy vendors also run on Windows, right? So there you have to make sure that Windows is up to date, that the security bubble around your Windows VM is in place. You might have to deploy SQL Server to basically store database information, et cetera. So all in all, I would say it's a very Frankenstein-ish architecture where you can just see there's bolt-on after bolt-on in their architecture. So all in all, expensive to deploy, right? Because there's many different moving pieces, many different compute pieces. And from a management, from an OpEx perspective, a lot of work just making sure the lights stay on, making sure that your databases are being backed up within the time periods, making sure that database backups across your data centers are running correctly. And more importantly, can I actually do the recovery of my backups as well? Are they working? Right? Some teams are so busy making sure the backups are working that they actually never test their backup strategies and their DR strategies, and they run into major issues at the moment something actually does go wrong. Nutanix actually did a fairly relevant survey not too long ago, right, around what it takes and what the customers are expecting from technology. At the moment, they really go from a on-prem private data center management model mantra to more like a multi-cloud hybrid management, right? As you know, Nutanix very much is enabling customers to go from on-prem into public clouds with the recent releases of NC2 on AWS and Azure, really building this stretched fabric, right, if you may, from a management layer perspective between private cloud, your data center, and the public cloud. But everybody pretty much indicates, yes, there's more complexity at the moment you do that. And they really require software vendors like us to help them simplify, right, that cross-cloud management layer. So just make it work, just make it simple. And that's where I strongly feel that HYCU Protege has done a fantastic job simplifying data protection from on-prem into public cloud. And let me go into a little bit more detail over there, right? Yes, we do, and probably most of you know, we do a very good job of protecting Nutanix on-prem, right? We are probably the vendor that has integrated with most of the Nutanix point solutions at this point in time, of course, from an NCI, AOS, AHV perspective, but we now also have integration with like unified storage, with the database engine, previously known as ERA. With NKE, we can back up and protect and recover NKE as well, right? So really ticking a lot of the boxes in where Nutanix is investing their technology stacks. But like I said, with the recent releases last year, over the last 2 years, of NC2 running on Azure and AWS, we can protect those as well. We can help you move workloads from on-prem into NC2. But we don't stop there. We take it one step further. We also can just do backups straight into Azure or AWS or Google, right? From a storage perspective, we can, of course, use their cloud storage, but we can also use them as a DR target. And there we can do DR and basically bring back your workloads as like cloud instances, or in case of Azure and AWS, we can actually do we can quickly spin up an NC2 cluster in case you need to do a DR movement if your on-prem is unavailable or it's locked down for investigation and so on. Spin up an NC2 cluster, reconnect your HYCU controller to that cluster, and start restoring workloads. So within the matter of hours, you're basically recovering all of your mission-critical workloads on Nutanix running in the public cloud. And that's where you're just paying basically by the hour. A very, I would say, cost-effective way of doing disaster recovery while still maintaining that simplicity from a Nutanix management layer. Same kind of having the same architecture diagram that I just explained, the complexity in the traditional, in the legacy world, right? HYCU itself is super easy to deploy. In most cases, it's a single virtual appliance, right? A single image that you deploy on, whether that runs on Nutanix, whether that runs on VMware. You can just import it, run it within a few minutes. Once it's up and running, you connect it to those clusters that you want to protect, workloads where those workloads that you want to protect are running, right? Just give us some credentials. We'll do the discovery. We will discover all of your workloads dynamically, and then connect it to storage, right? Whether that is on-prem storage, like your traditional storage appliances, right? Your NetApps, your EMCs. We of course have a fantastic integration with unified storage as well, right? Especially with objects and Worm, where we can basically store read-only copies of your backups, right? Very important around ransomware there. But of course, we have integration with all of the popular cloud storage-based workloads as well, right? AWS S3, GCP, Azure Blobs, good relationship with Wasabi as well, right? Really pay as you go from a storage perspective. So within minutes, you can deploy your virtual appliance and be up and running and start doing successful backups. I mentioned we run as a virtual appliance. It's of course Linux based, so we have from an engineering perspective, we've really focused on security. We've applied all of the security best practices, STIGs, et cetera, and no overhead in terms of licensing costs for that appliance, because in the end, it is Linux. Built in scale out and scale up logic within our stack, right? To really make sure that from an initial sizing perspective, we can deploy and just it's sized correctly for for backing up all of your workloads. But we're all growing, we're all deploying more workloads on a day-to-day basis. So as your primary infrastructure grows, HYCU can grow with you, right? And we have lots of guidance around that on our website. This virtual appliance does everything for us, right? It is not that, oh, I want reporting, I have to deploy a reporting service. No, we do reporting from that single virtual appliance. We do cross-cluster management from that single virtual appliance. Very efficient licensing as well, really aligning with Nutanix licensing. So we have licensing options available that work for you, right? Whether that is on a per VM basis, whether that is on a per socket basis, or for like unified storage workloads, capacity-based licensing is available as well. So whatever you need, however you grow, we can grow with you from a licensing perspective. And of course, we're purpose-built. We have really good alignments with the Nutanix team. From a product perspective, we do very frequent roadmap interactions and so on. And we've really helped Nutanix build out some of those very advanced backup capabilities at the engineering level, right? Like Nutanix files, file tracking, the file tracking APIs we co-developed with them. So files will tell us which files have changed, so we can basically just back up those files, right, for an incremental, rather than having to go through the entire file system tree and do the scanning ourselves. That can take hours in large deployments. So yeah, really a good alignment with Nutanix, and you start seeing that in our functionality that we offer to you as customers and as prospects as well, right? One of the things that we pride ourselves on is the ability to discover applications running in virtual machines, and we do that completely agentless, right? So we work with Nutanix to discover those, whether that is like SQL Server or Exchange or other database workloads and a whole suite of other applications that we discover. And at the moment we start backing those up, we can actually work with the application to do the right thing for backup, right? We can put it in hot backup mode. We can do log truncation. And when we do recovery, we're actually application aware as well. So we can do really granular recoveries from maybe a database table, maybe an email box, et cetera, et cetera. So all of that magic basically is built into our stack. We help a lot of customers with data mobility and workload mobility between like non-Nutanix infrastructure. Maybe you're existing vSphere infrastructure. You can use HYCU to move workloads onto Nutanix, and we do all of the right things. We can move workloads between Nutanix clusters, whether that is running on-prem or in the cloud. We can move workloads from on-prem running as native instances. I mentioned that before, right? And that really gets us into like the disaster recovery bucket, where we can help you build comprehensive failover plans from Nutanix to Nutanix, of course, Nutanix to NC2. And I mentioned that use case that really is resonating well, where you can spin up an NC2 cluster on demand, right, as your disaster recovery location. And I mentioned we can do DR into the public cloud as well. We can run on-prem workloads and we can recover those as instances running natively on GCP, on AWS and Azure. So a lot of good functionality to really that allows you to respond to any kind of outage within your data center. A couple of points on why we think we're better. I strongly feel like having this mantra of being purpose-built really helps us, right? Like I said, we have very deep integration from a technical perspective with the Nutanix technology stacks, right? So we're purpose-built to really align with NCI, with unified storage, with NDB, with NKE, all of those solutions that Nutanix is bringing to the market as well. We were the first one to really successfully integrate with NC2 as well and do the testing and certification there. So from a functionality perspective, whether you're running on-prem, whether you're running in AWS, whether you're running in Azure, everything works the same, and you can just trust the technology to work. And then one of the unique things about our solution is we're understanding Nutanix snapshots as well, right? So whether you're creating snapshots yourselves, whether we create snapshots, we can leave certain snapshots, a certain number of snapshots on the Nutanix cluster and use those to do very fast recovery of workloads, right? Rather than having to go back to your backup storage and do a full hydration of data, we can just recover from a Nutanix snapshot. But we also understand Nutanix replication, right? So if you're running a cluster that is replicating to another Nutanix cluster, we can actually do the backups, the data migration, the data ingestion from that replicated snapshot, right? So that really frees up your production cluster from a CPU overhead perspective, but it also frees up the network, right? Say there is a very limited networking pipe between your primary cluster, maybe your robo location. This basically our architecture now avoids having to do a second copy over the network, right? So it saves you in bandwidth as well from a cost perspective, but also if the pipe is really small, we're not overloading the pipe with that secondary copy, pulling the backup information over the network. Just like Nutanix really prides themselves on bringing this simplicity to your data center, right? From a deployment, from a management perspective, we do the same here at HYCU. Our designs are fantastic. Our UI designs, our UI interaction, very intuitive. We really have had customers by themselves deploy our virtual appliance, get it up and running, hook it up to Nutanix, hook it up to storage, and within 15 minutes, all by themselves without reading the documentation, they have backups working. That's just fantastic, right? Our technology stack from a UI perspective, we're using the same technology as Nutanix Prism. So it looks and feels the same. We're using the same vocabulary as well, right? So if you're used to the Nutanix Prism interface and where to find things, we use the same words, we use the same approach in our UI. And all in all, yeah, very lightweight. And from a storage perspective, and I touched on this earlier, we don't own your storage. We integrate with storage that you own, right? So you manage the storage end to end, right? Yes, of course, we do the data movement, but in the end, where the data is stored, that is your storage. We don't own that storage. So from a compliance perspective, that frees up a lot of those questions that sometimes you have to answer if you have an all-in-one stack. The other point, and I don't touch on that enough in this presentation, is the importance of worm for your backup storage, right? Ransomware is everywhere, right? I cannot have a customer conversation without going deep on ransomware, and there's some very public examples as well. But in my mind, if you have a copy of your data, right, a backup that is sitting on storage, that is guaranteed to be secure, that is guaranteed to be that nobody can delete it or encrypt that, even if they have admin rights, that is really the last layer of defense against ransomware. If you get hacked, if your workloads start disappearing, they get encrypted and so on. If you can recover, you just turn everything up, clean up your environment, and you can recover those workloads on your primary infrastructure, because that's a known good copy of your data. That is golden, right? Not having to pay out ransomware, ticking all of the boxes from a compliance, from an insurance perspective. I think that is very, very important. If you are not using worm storage for your backups in any way today, really start looking at that, because we're seeing ransomware pop up all over the place. There's so many attacks, so many successful attacks as well. Couple of words on aligning with Nutanix. I mentioned this already, right? So we are from a technology integration perspective, we are the vendor that has the most integration, and in some cases the only vendor that is out there that has done the work to align with Nutanix from a solution and from a functionality perspective. So just to pull a few out from the screen over here, stun-free backups on ESX. A lot of in typical ESX deployments, when backup software takes a snapshot, that happens at the VMware level, right? And the way VMware has implemented snapshots is there's a lot of interruption in the IO path. At the moment you create a snapshot, when you consolidate snapshots, when you delete snapshots and so on, you see a huge impact on application performance, right? Your IOPS will go down, your transaction per minute will go down, et cetera, et cetera. HYCU always uses Nutanix snapshots, which are metadata driven. So at the moment a snapshot gets created, you see just a very slight little blip, right? So a lot less impact on performance, a lot less impact on your infrastructure. So your applications keep running very, very smooth. I already talked about us being aware of Nutanix replication, so I'm not going to do that again. Once again, worm capabilities, Nutanix objects with worm, we're fully integrated, we're fully certified over there. So that really builds that last layer of defense. Last thing I wanted to point out is around the Nutanix validated design. Over the last year or two, Nutanix has done a fantastic job of building out a collection of reference architectures that they call Nutanix validated design around use cases like hybrid cloud and unified storage and database workloads and so on. HYCU is the only vendor that is actively used in those reference architectures. So that really gives you the, that shows the trust that the Nutanix solutions architects, right? Their enterprise architects, the guys that have been with Nutanix probably for the last 10 years, they trust HYCU to protect all of those workloads in a secure, in a scalable fashion, in a very usable fashion. So if you haven't looked at the NVDs yet, please check them out. They're fantastic resources. I think I saw an email, they just published like a mid-size enterprise version of the NVD. So if you're in that market segment, it gives you a good blueprint on how to deploy Nutanix in the most scalable and manageable way, but also how to basically use HYCU to go along with that and do all of the data protection for you. All right, what are we, about 25 minutes in? So a few more slides, and then let's have a look at questions. I call this the 1, 2, 3, 4 equals 100 slide, and without context, this is kind of puzzling and so on. But once I build out, I think it starts making sense, right? It is so easy to deploy HYCU. It is so easy to set up to do the discover all of the applications running on Nutanix, and then to start basically doing backups or migrations or DR we expose those as one-click, two-click operations, right? So really, within a few minutes, you can get started. Within a few minutes, you can get everything configured, right? But this gives you that 100% coverage across your computer estate, across your business estate, that you can recover pretty much from any kind of outage, whether that is like a VM corruption, whether that is data center down, whether that is I lost power in a rack, et cetera, et cetera. We help you build those contingency plans against pretty much any level of outage within your data center. Quick look at customer, a good joint customer between Nutanix and HYCU. Healthcare provider nationally here within the US. They run into a lot of issues maintaining or staying within their data protection windows, their backup windows, and so on. Right, so they had a pretty big Nutanix files share, and they were unable basically to back up that Nutanix file share within their daily backup window. They were always blowing out of time. They always needed more time. So that really had a big impact on their main business, helping people stay healthy or get healthy and so on. So they deployed Protege for Nutanix. Like I said, we have integration with CFT, right? So Nutanix files will tell us what files have changed since the last backup. So it's very efficient now to do a backup because we're only having to pull out those files that change. So rather than scanning the entire file system tree for hours, you can now do this within minutes, right? So we really help them shrink their backup windows, but we also help them streamlining their operational efficiencies, right? If you don't have to fight to keep the lights on from a backup perspective, you can actually free up resources that can start looking at how can I help support the business better, right? And really be more proactive rather than reactive. So they saw very good initial cost savings, but they're expecting to save even more money over the next few years because they can now basically leverage those freed up resources in more productive ways, in more proactive ways. So do more with less. All in all, a couple of conclusions that I want to leave you with today. Right? I always joke, for legacy backup, you really need a PhD in backup to do the design, right? Because you have to understand how all of those components need to be configured, how they work together, and so on. You need to read their admin manuals that probably are yay thick. And then from a management perspective, from a keeping the lights perspective, from a scaling perspective, and not to mention upgrades, right? Those are very, very painful. So PhD in backup is required over there. HYCU will give you the next level of business agility, right? If we make backup super easy for you, for your IT teams, for your backup teams, and they can basically streamline their operations, redeploy certain resources, they can start looking at helping your business scale out and run smoother and do business focused projects. You're really decreasing your TCO, and in the end, you're going to be a lot more agile and a lot more successful on the front end. And I can only guarantee you our Nutanix focus is going to be unwavered, right? We have a fantastic relationship from a product perspective in terms of roadmaps and integration points, and we help each other be better every day on. From an executive perspective, there's great alignment between the executive teams at Nutanix and HYCU. So you have my guarantee going forward where Nutanix stays our 100% focus, and we'll only do things that will make your life better. One more thing, this all sounds fantastic, of course, but we really encourage you to try it out yourself. And there's a couple of ways of doing this. You can scan the QR code over here or go to hycu.com/get/demo, and we can schedule a demo with you, whether that is in our labs, whether you feel comfortable in your data center or in your test environment. We can set this up for you, with you, and let you play around with it. We have free trials available as well. right? So you can go onto our website. We'll give you a 30-day completely unlocked trial that you can deploy within your data center, once again, within your test environment, set it up, start playing around with this, create some backup policies, see how easy it is to do the backups, how easy it is to do the recoveries. And then the last resource that I want to point out is Nutanix Test Drive, where Nutanix basically has built out for various different use cases and scenarios and solutions. They have a completely self-contained environment within the Nutanix data centers where they run the Nutanix stack, but they also have one where basically they're showcasing the integration with HYCU, right? So you get a Nutanix environment where a few test workloads are running, but you also get a full-fledged HYCU environment. They give you a like a self-guided tour through the HYCU UI, how to do backups, how to do restores, and so on. And then they basically give it to you for a few hours, right? So you can play with it in their sandbox without having to really open up your own sandbox. So very good resource there as well. So free trials, we can do a demo, or you can basically work with Nutanix to get a demo in their sandbox. All right, I think I saw a lot of questions pop in. So Kim, are you still out there? Can you see what questions we can start answering?
So we do have several questions that came in. So first one from Sam: how is HYCU Protege for Nutanix licensed?
Yeah, good question. Thanks, Sam. So we're really trying to align with how Nutanix licenses as well. So we have licensing flavors available that are per VM, per socket, and for like the unified storage-based workloads per capacity per terabyte as well. And our sales team is more than willing to sit down with you and understand your current environment and how you want to grow, right? Where you have growth plans over the next 12, 24 months, maybe 36 months, and basically build the right licensing model for you that makes sense for you. So per VM, per socket, per terabyte. And then we have two licensing levels, right? Our standard level, and then we have a premium level that unlocks more functionality within HYCU Protege.
Awesome, thanks, Mark. So a question from Shari, I hope I got that right. Will it be possible to share this deck to present some content to my CIO? Yes, we will. I'll send this in a follow-up to you for sure.
Yep. And let us know if we can help with that as well, right? We have sales coverage all over the globe, yes. So we can help you there as well.
Yes. Okay, so from Zuri, I think you kind of touched on this. I'm currently using Veeam, and this seems a lot. This seems a lot simpler. Do you have a way for me to actually see how it works? So yes, this QR code that Mark shared is a great resource. We also have a free trial available that is really quick and easy to set up, so you can kind of see how it works in your environment. I will drop a link in the chat in just a minute for you. Let's see, next question. From Brian: can I store my backups locally and in the cloud?
Great question, Brian. I touched on our ability to integrate with all the storage flavors, right? Whether that is on-prem or in the cloud. But of course, yeah, our policies allow for basically setting up tiering capabilities as well. So you can store a certain number of backups or a certain capacity of backups, and then basically starts making copies into the cloud-based storage more for an archival use case. So a lot of capabilities that are built into products, whether it's time-based or capacity-based or number of snapshot-based, you can configure it all of those ways.
Okay, we just had a question come in from Vincent in the chat, so I'm going to kind of skip ahead so that I don't forget to come back to this one. Who support backups of Nutanix files to object tiering? Specifically, we're tiering cold Nutanix files data to objects. When a HYCU backup is run daily, will it pull that data from objects?
Yeah, it will. It will. So as the backup vendor, when we're backing up files, even when that data is actually sitting on objects from a tiering perspective, to us, it will look like a single namespace. So we'll back up everything. But if it hasn't changed, right? If it hasn't changed and it's an incremental backup, then we won't actually back up the data because files is telling us it hasn't changed for the last 7 days, 14 days or something like that since the last backup. So we actually will skip that file so you don't see that data migration. So very, very efficient, very elegant solution there. Thanks, Vincent.
Okay, next one from Brian. Can I store my backups locally and in the cloud? Yes. So this is that storage agnostic value point that Mark touched on.
Yep.
You can store your data in the best location for your business, for your compliance requirements. We do offer disaster recovery. So if you do choose to leverage HYCU Protege for disaster recovery and use the cloud as a backup target, you can actually spin up there as well. So Mark, anything to add there?
No, just engage with our sales team, with our solutions architect. They can look at what the requirements are and they can work together with you to basically build out the right solution for you there. But yeah, all of those capabilities are available. It's just what recipe works for you.
Great. From Doug, you mentioned ransomware a few times and didn't give many details. Where can I find more information on how HYCU can help?
Yeah, so we've actually done a few webinars within the last 12 months, and let's take a follow-up item and let's put the most recent one in there from November, I think, where we really did a deep dive around ransomware and how HYCU, especially in combination with Nutanix objects, can help you build that last layer of defense that I was talking about, right? But yeah, just quickly recapping. Nutanix does a fantastic job of basically building like active protection from a security networking perspective and so on. But if you have a copy of your data that is not deletable, not encryptable, not modifiable, even if you have admin rights, that is your last layer of defense against a successful ransomware attack.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. I will pull that webinar link and send it. We have one more question. Can you give, and this is from Mary, can you give more detail on backing up from Nutanix replicated snapshots?
Yeah, good. Yeah, I really think it's one of those where we're the only one that have built this intelligence. So think of it this way. You have Nutanix running in robo locations typically, right? So whether that is stores or ships or remote locations, et cetera, they replicate maybe on, say, a daily basis back to a central location for backup and for disaster, typically disaster recovery use cases, right? So you always have a fairly recent copy of your data sitting centrally, and if the robo location goes down and you have to rebuild it, you can easily recover from that. What Nutanix has built is basically we understand Nutanix snapshots and we understand replication. So we know when a snapshot is there and it's been replicated to the central location. So if you run HYCU centrally, you can of course do the discovery of all of the workloads that are running on the edge, running in the robo locations. But at the moment we take a backup and we notice that there is a replicated snapshot already that is basically much closer to us, we'll use that snapshot to do the backup, right? So rather than having to do the discovery and then pull off the information over the wire twice, right? Because Nutanix does it once, and then we'd have to do is, no, we just take the data locally and are avoiding that second copy on the wire. Yeah, great use case. We see this being used within data centers as well at the moment, where say you're running a mission critical database on Nutanix, and you want to do a backup. You can also there use the secondary copy, the replicated snapshots, so you don't overload, you don't put extra load on your database server. So application-wise, you have full performance while you're still meeting all of your backup objectives on the backend. Great question.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. So that was the last question. I think we got through them all.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you again for joining us today. We will follow up with, we'll go back through the chat. If we did miss anything, we'll follow up with you all individually. Thank you again for taking the time to join us today, and we hope to see you on a free trial or in a demo soon.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.